purpose, a projection of our will, and I think it's a message to friends and adversaries alike that this is a completely different ballgame that we're in now. Be happy to take questions, but I'm probably going to not get into a lot of details. Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary, how much of this $20 billion is for, first of all, for the military, and how much involves cleanup and current operations, you say, such as AirCap, and how much involves preparing the military to strike back? Can you give us any sense of how much involves preparing for strike back?
I don't think we know the breakdown yet, partly because the needs are so enormous. It basically includes all of the above, and not, as I said, not just for the Defense Department. There is help for the victims and their families. I mean, even things as simple as DOD mortuary teams that have gone up to New York to help with the disaster up there. You've seen the disaster in this building, and we still have major work to do. But obviously a significant piece of this is going to be to bring our armed forces to the highest level of preparedness to be able to execute whatever it is the President may ask them to do.
How much of the $20 billion would be for the armed forces?
That remains to be worked out.
Well, it has not been.
No.
Secretary Wolfowitz, it kind of rolls off the tongue pretty well, sustained and broad against terrorism, but doing it, most people concede, is a totally different issue. According to the polls, the American public supports military action against those who conducted the attack on Tuesday. But what do you hit, and how do you go after it? If it is Osama bin Laden or somebody comparable, there don't seem to be any hard targets, nothing comparable to the damage done here. What kind of a war do you wage?
Well, I think we're going to see how this unfolds, and it's going to unfold over time. I think one thing is clear, is that you don't do it with just a single military strike, no matter how dramatic. You don't do it with just military forces alone. You do it with the full resources of the U.S. government. It will be a campaign, not a single action. And we're going to keep after these people and the people who support them until this stops. And it has to be treated that way. Yes.
Mr. Secretary, what support will you be getting from the allies in this effort? NATO has expressed support. Are you talking with your Russian counterparts? Will we see a different alliance
I think the
striking
whole
at terrorism?
civilized world has been shocked by what's happened, and even some elements of the uncivilized world have begun to wonder whether maybe they're on the wrong side here. The President's been in close contact with a number of world leaders, including our allies, including President Putin of Russia, including our friends in the Middle East, in the Gulf region. I think everyone understands that we have unfortunately entered a new era. We're all going to be tested. We're going to be coming to each one of them, I'm sure, with a variety of different requests. Some of those are being developed. Many more we're going to develop as we proceed. And I think so far we've seen indications from a wide variety of sources that people will step up when asked. And believe me, they will be asked. Yes.
And does this mean there's an end to any kind of drawdown of the military?
I'm not sure which drawdown you were referring to. We were talking in the context of the QDR about major investments to build up our military for the next decade. I think what this means is there are also going to be some huge requirements to build up our military for the next year and maybe longer. Yes?
Yes, Mr. Secretary, you have a quadrennial defense review that's due to Congress in just a few weeks, and certainly this changes the whole perspective of it. It changes everything from the program that you're going to put your money in. Do you still intend on meeting that September 30th deadline, or what do you plan on doing with the quadrennial defense review?
I don't think a final decision's been made on that. I wouldn't agree that it changes everything. It changes a great deal, and as I just said in answer to the previous question, we now have requirements that we didn't contemplate 2 weeks ago, but I don't think that means that the requirements that we contemplated for 10 and 15 years from now are necessarily all that different. Yes.
Sir, question about the budget process as it stood on Monday before the incidents. Have you or anyone else at OSD level issued different guidance, different directions today or yesterday as to the disposition of the development of the next prom cycle and budget as a result of the tragedy? And can you give us any visibility about where you stand in building that next fiscal perspective for the military buildup that you've discussed. Have you put that down in writing to the forces?
Well, as I think you probably understand, because it's a well-informed question, that the budget process is a great big machine, and you don't sort of turn it on or off or steer it quickly. And I think that machine continues to work in a lot of fine-grained detail on our out-year requirements. Clearly, there are going to be a whole range of new requirements, and we are already working with the services and defense agencies to start to identify a range of what those near-term requirements may be. As you probably realize, this $20 billion is O1 money, and so it doesn't even begin to address the question of amended requirements for O2 and beyond. We are in a different era. I think the President has made that clear. The Secretary of Defense has made that clear. Everything is going to change, but we hope that with this $20 billion initial move forward, that particularly our enemies will get a message, and the people who have to be with us will get a message as well that we're serious.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
The President has said that the United States intends to find those who were responsible for these attacks and hold them accountable. But he and others, including you today, have also spoken about a much broader campaign that would seem to go beyond, in terms of targets, beyond those that may have been responsible for this particular attack. How should we look at that?
Well, I think the President's words are pretty good, so let me say, these people try to hide, but they won't be able to hide forever. They think their harbors are safe, but they won't be safe forever. I think one has to say it's not just simply a matter of capturing people and holding them accountable, but removing the sanctuaries, removing the support systems, ending states who sponsor terrorism, and that's why it has to be a broad and sustained campaign. It's not going to stop if a few criminals are taken care of. Yes.
Do you anticipate, I mean, given the devastation in New York, I mean, $20 billion looks like it's just going to be a down payment on repairing what was destroyed. Do you anticipate having to shift around any of DoD's internal resources in the 2002 budget to cover some of the bill here and to begin work on any of the kind of anti-terrorism or counterterrorism?
I anticipate, and the indications from the Congress are that my anticipation is well-founded, that we will have new additional resources to cover not only the damage that has been inflicted, but to start to begin to build the military capability we need for other options. So I don't envision shifting resources around, as your question implies.
So the money that you all have asked for now would stay where it is, and then you expect to get additional resources in the 2002 budget for added work restoration
That's my
here.
expectation, yes. Over here.
Secretary Mineta talked today about his request to put military personnel aboard civilian airliners when they start flying again and to supplement the Sky Marshal program. Have you received that request from the Transportation Department, and do you think that's one you're going to be able to take on now?
I'm not sure what Secretary Mineta said. The question of marshals is a complicated one. The question of putting U.S. military personnel who may or may not be trained in law enforcement techniques on planes is a difficult one. We're obviously going to work with the Transportation Department and with the FBI and the Marshal Service and anyone who can use our expertise to provide what capabilities are needed. But it is a complicated issue. Yes, indeed.
Just to follow on that question, if I could, Secretary Mineta also said that he was going to request personnel from Delta Force to come in and train air marshals in a speedy fashion to get them up and running quickly. I'm assuming, I guess, that you have not received such a request. Are you willing to entertain such a request? Is this something that would be appropriate for the Defense Department?
There's definitely been discussion, and I don't know whether you want to get into semantic discussion about what's a request, what's not a request. What is needed, and I think we all agree on it, is a plan for training up civilian air marshals, and if U.S. military expertise is useful in that, obviously we want to make it available. At the same time, this is fundamentally a civil function. It doesn't require all the exotic training that Delta Force members have, and on the other hand, it requires law enforcement training that our people don't have. So we're going to be working closely. I hope you understand, I mean, there's a great deal that we're improvising here as we go. We're trying to improvise as fast as we possibly can.
That may or may not be deemed appropriate. There may be some other avenue that would be more desirable.
I think the exact way forward hasn't been decided yet. Yes, and that.
As a follow-up, you said some of the money will be to start to build the military capability we need. You've been identifying terrorism as a threat now for 10 years. What is it that you envision when you say that? What is the capability that we don't have that we need?
The capabilities to sustain. We have an enormous capability. That's no secret. But it's also no secret. Go back 10 years, we had enormous capability when we actually deployed several 100,000 troops for Desert Storm. We needed sustainment, we needed munitions, we needed logistics, we needed fuel, we needed things that you don't plan for because you don't plan for that level of operations on a day-to-day basis. So across...
We want to break into the Undersecretary's briefing to bring in this tape that's happening right now that we saw moments ago, and it's the first time we've seen this tape.
Met with their families. This is a great hospital. The doctors and nurses are not only accomplished, they're loving people. There's a wonderful spirit up on the floor that we went to. We told them that our country's praying for each and every one there. We're praying for their families. Some of the folks could talk, and they described the horror of the incident in the moment. They talked about escaping, going through fire, and crawling through debris. That it's clear that they were fighting for their survival then, and like every patient up there, they're still fighting for their survival. And it's just a sobering moment for Laura and me, but we're, again, thank the hospital, the docs, the nurses, and of course, again, tell the families that the nation prays for those who have been injured during this unbelievable act of terror. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Let's go. Head to the motorcade, guys.
Now, if you're watching a live pair about maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes ago or so, we saw this scene from a different perspective when President Bush and First Lady Laura Bush walked out of the George Washington Center Hospital there, and we were wondering what had gone on with that impromptu press conference where he stopped on the curb. That was it, and you're seeing that tape for the first time as we saw that tape for the first time. Let's check in now with our senior White House correspondent, John Kay. John?
Well, Leon, that scene outside the Washington Medical Center, one of the snapshots we have seen just in the past few hours, never mind the past 2 days, of the many emotions and the many challenges facing not only the President but the First Lady as well at this very difficult moment. The President went to the hospital along with Laura Bush to visit 11 victims, those among the most seriously injured when that plane crashed into the Pentagon. He left the White House to go to the hospital just moments after a telephone call to both the governor of New York and New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. In that phone call, the President promised them the full support of the federal government in the recovery efforts, and he also announced that he will indeed leave Washington and visit New York tomorrow to get a first-hand look not only at the devastation caused by these terrorist attacks, but also to go up there and check in on the relief and recovery effort. Now, in that conference call, the President also talked of his efforts to deal with this. The investigation is underway. We know from sources that the U.S. government, Mr. Bush in his conversations with National Security Team, already considering potential military options to respond to this. Mr. Bush, in a conversation with reporters after that phone call, alluded to that, saying this is the first war of the 21st century, he said, and the United States, he promised, would respond.
Make no mistake about it, my resolve is steady and strong about winning this war that has been declared on America. It's a new kind of war. And I understand it's a new kind of war. And this government will adjust. And this government will call others to join us to make sure this act, these acts, the people who conducted these acts and those who harbor them are held accountable for their actions.
The President there showing his resolve as Commander-in-Chief, but it was just a few minutes later that the President teared up when talking to reporters about another responsibility of the President, any President at a moment of crisis like this. Mr. Bush talking about his efforts not only to console, but also to reassure the nation.
I think about the families, the children. I'm a loving guy. And I'm also someone, however, who's got a job to do. And I intend to do it. And this is a terrible moment. But this country will not relent until we have saved ourselves and others from the terrible tragedy